Welcome to another episode of Writing on Caffeine, the podcast where you can come along on a journey with a father and daughter as we attempt to write our first novels. I am Jonathan Franzone, and this is my daughter.
I'm Ragan, also Franzone.
So we are recording at our regular now location, which is my house, and it is evening, and we are both drinking hot tea.
Yes.
So this is Yogi Honey Lavender Stress Relief Tea.
I feel very stress relieved.
Yes, very relaxed. So we just had a writing session before this.
Yeah.
Which was nice because we actually put words on the page.
Yep. I did about 300.
I did just over 400, so that's good.
How was it?
It was very terrible.
Yeah, me too.
At one point, I was shifting into some omniscient point of view, and I don't know why.
Yeah, I didn't even realize it until I went back and read through. I was writing first person, my book's in first person, and then I shifted into third person and then back into first person without even realizing it.
Yeah.
I was like, that's a second draft problem.
Yeah.
I'll go back and fix it later.
I think that's what happens when you don't write for so long.
SDP.
That's right. So that is how the writing's coming. We did make some progress today. Mm-hmm. Hey, Jonathan here. I just wanted to let you know that this podcast episode was recorded last year. That's 2023, and we are just now publishing it. That's why some of the comments may seem a bit out of place, and especially when we get to what we are currently reading. I also wanted to remind you that we are giving away 3 books on writing. They are Wordsmithy by Douglas Wilson, On Writing and Writers by C.S. Lewis, and Adorning the Dark by Andrew Peterson. Go to the website writingoncaffeine.com to enter, and you have until the end of January. So tonight we're going to talk about setting and the role of setting in storytelling.
Yep.
In many ways, a setting can often take on its own character, if you will. And so I thought one question we should answer, what is setting? And then what is the difference? Because in storytelling, there's the setting, but there's also a backdrop, and then there's also world building, and these are not the same thing.
Right.
So with world building, that you would think of something that's all encompassing. Mm-hmm. So J.R.R. Tolkien's Middle Earth and everything involved.
Right.
It's just massive world building.
It includes a lot of, I had the word right on the tip of my tongue. Where'd it go?
It was right there.
It was. Culture.
Culture.
A lot of culture
Yes.
and history.
Yeah, absolutely. Religions, economic systems, etc. And then backdrop is just something that's passive and generic, like the city or the mountains or something like that.
Right.
So it's not...
There was a tree.
Right.
It was sunny.
Right. It doesn't really grip you in any way. It's
Right.
just kind of where they are. And then the setting is the immediate time and place and atmosphere. An example of this, something that is more than just a place, would be the moors in The Hound of the Baskervilles.
Yeah.
So the moors add this very mysterious aspect to the story, and it really grounds it in just this mist and darkness
Right.
For the whole book. I thought we could talk about different examples of this and just see. Do you want to say anything about that before we jump in, or?
Let's just dive in.
So some of the ways that setting can become its own character is that it influences the plot.
Yep.
So characters generally are responsible for this, but in some cases you may have the actual setting change the way the plot moves forward.
Right. Like how Hogwarts changes around on the inside.
Right.
And
Literally changes.
and causes there's a bubble in my throat. Causes Harry, Ron, and Hermione to find Fluffy.
Right,
Because
yeah.
the staircases move.
Right, so the castle was, or the school was responsible for that part of the plot. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good example. Another one is emotion. So these types of settings evoke a lot of emotion. I think you could include Hogwarts with that, especially if you're watching the movies, because the movies have music and they set the whole emotional feel. But even when you're reading through it and the descriptions of Hogwarts, it has a very unique feel to it.
Yeah.
And especially with Harry, because when he's at the Dursleys, it's different.
Right.
And then he goes to Hogwarts, which feels more like home. It feels magical.
Yeah.
It's where he's happiest.
The castle is almost omniscient. Or not omniscient. Is that the word I'm looking for?
Alive.
Like sentient.
Yeah.
It kind of directs the students. It kind of changes itself to the seasons and such. Even like I feel like the ghosts could be considered part of that.
Yeah.
Because
and the paintings.
they kind of yeah.
A good setting shapes character development.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can see this a lot in Hogwarts.
Yep.
Features of the school itself cause the students to change.
Yep.
And they have to develop. Symbolism is another way that settings can take on their own character.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote that down because it sounded right, but I don't actually have any examples.
I do. In the book series that I read, The Throne of Glass, there is this forest that the main characters have to travel through near the end of the series. So throughout the series, they kind of talk about how it's haunted, like the little folk, fae creatures have all like retreated into this forest because there's been an attack on magic. Magic is illegal. Nobody does it anymore. But all of these magical creatures that have existed in the world previously have retreated into like the densest part of this forest. And so nobody likes to go in there. They're scared. So towards the end, I guess this is a symbolism type thing. Towards the end of the book, there's this huge war between a bunch of different people. There's a lot of players and whatever.
Right.
But they have to travel through this forest. But the main character is part of like the fae people, and it's like she's returning home. Mm-hmm. But to get through this forest, they have to burn it down.
Nice.
So it's very symbolic. Like this was like kind of her childhood. This is where she grew up.
Right.
Then moving through, we have to get rid of it, but it's changing the world. It's changing the setting.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. We kind of already mentioned this, but settings can be dynamic and changing. Mm-hmm. So, like Hogwarts, literally changes. So, as you mentioned, the staircases move, and so you could end up where you weren't expecting to go.
Right.
All right. So now that we've kind of had to bring out some examples to talk about how a setting can become its own character, but I thought we could just kind of run down some examples and talk about the different ways that these settings add character. Mm-hmm. So obviously we've talked about Hogwarts quite a bit, but then also you have the setting in the Harry Potter world of the Dursleys' house.
Yep.
So this adds its own character because anytime you're at the Dursleys' house, it's almost like, you're talking about symbolism. It's almost like prison for Harry.
Yeah.
Because he can't go anywhere. He can't do magic anymore.
He sleeps under the stairs.
He sleeps under the stairs. The Dursleys hate him.
And then after he gets out from under the stairs, he's locked in his room with like a little cubby that they shove food through.
Right, yeah. So there's the setting of the Dursleys' house. And that it does a lot to shape Harry. Mm-hmm. Because he's frustrated with that. He's found this new world, but here he's stuck in this old world. And then eventually he actually even learns to have some compassion for the Dursleys.
Right.
Towards the end of the series. Then also the Weasley house, which makes an appearance in several of the books.
It's like the opposite of the Dursleys.
Right. It's very free and filled with magic.
Yeah, a little chaotic, but full of love.
Yeah.
You can tell the parents love their kids. The kids are comfortable in the house.
Right. Yeah, when the boys steal Mr. Weasley's car that he's added magic to so that it can fly, and they kidnap Harry and take him back, it's Harry's first experience of being at the Weasley's house. Mm-hmm. And he's just so in awe of everything in the house because, she has... dishes cleaning themselves.
Right. The clock that changes with their location.
In danger.
Right.
It's got different settings. It's very funny. I don't know if you wanted to talk about Hunger Games.
Yeah, that is a very... I'm sorry, I just lost my words. It's a good setting because there's a lot going on there. I mean, the original setting, like the beginning of the books, is District 12, which is basically like a hole that they live in where everybody's poor. Nobody really has anything to eat. Everybody's dying of starvation. Yeah. It's depressing because there's guards everywhere, and if you do something wrong, you get hanged or whipped or shot, you know.
It's the outcome of tyranny.
Right.
Basically.
So Katniss and Peeta get shipped off to the capital where everybody's living super lavishly, and they do things like eat a bunch of food and then make themselves throw it all up so that they can keep eating. And
as one does.
It's like the complete opposite of District 12. So everything is just in excess.
Right.
Everything's very bright and neon. People do weird things to their hair, and it's just very... Suzanne Collins really paints most of the population of the capital as very ignorant and stupid.
That makes sense.
It does make sense. They're sheeple.
Yeah.
And then once they enter the games, that's when the setting gets really interesting, because the setting changes because the game makers can alter it.
Right.
So, like, Katniss gets towards the edge of the arena in the first book, and they just flip a switch and start a forest fire to get her out of the way.
They have to drive her back into the middle.
Right. So that's a very interesting setting, because there's cameras everywhere. They're being watched. They know they're being watched, but they don't see any cameras.
Right, yeah.
And then the setting is, like, always got... Like, there's always a chance that something's going to change.
Right.
That something terrible is going to happen. Or they talk about in the books... There was one games, like, in the past where everybody died of a natural disaster because nobody was fighting. And, like, it was, like, the most boring Hunger Games in the last 75 years or something crazy like that, because half of them died in a landslide. So,
yeah, that's pretty boring.
it's very interesting.
So it certainly does a lot to drive the plot, because so much, at least of that first book, happens in the game.
Right.
You know, it's just survival at that point. You've got people trying to murder you. You've got the game makers or designers trying to prod you in the way they want you to die.
Right. So not only are they fighting against each other, but they're also fighting their surroundings.
Yeah.
Because they don't know what could be poisoned. They don't know what could be, just a trick or a trap.
Right. And then you recently finished Way of Kings?
I did.
Yay.
Just the first book, not all of them.
So the big setting that I thought of in The Way of Kings was the Shattered Plains.
Yep.
So this is the big plains, and it's all these trenches. So there's like an upper level and then a lower level, like down in all these trenches. And so the bridge runners, they have to run and hold these bridges and throw them over the trench, and then they have to run over and carry them to the next one.
Right.
So that the soldiers can march over
and fight.
And go fight the Parshendi so that they can get the gem hearts instead of them.
Right.
And this setting is just grueling. It's tough.
It's hot.
The main character, what's his name, Kaladin?
I almost said Kelsier, but
it's not Kelsier.
It starts with a K.
It's a K. So he does a lot of growing in this setting. Even the difference between the upper levels when they're, in the battles and doing all this stuff, to the little villages that are camps on the edge of the plains that they're living in, and then even later they go into the trenches, and he's like training the bridge crew.
Yeah.
And so that's a whole different environment.
Right. There's like monsters down there that can hurt you,
and it can like flash floods. So if the storm comes up and you're in the trench, you're basically dead.
Yeah.
And also, this is probably more world building, but Sanderson builds this world with crustaceans being the land animals.
Yes.
Which just blows my mind.
There's like eels swimming in the sky.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting.
And like what you would think they had oxes or horses or something to pull carts on, there's like these big crabs or something.
Yeah, like hermit crabs
right.
or something. Yeah, it's very cool.
It is very, very interesting. And it just adds a really neat component to the story.
Yeah.
Like the story by itself is really good. Then you add this setting and this world, building to it, and it's just a whole different level.
It's almost like if a ocean like dried out and turned into a desert. It's like what it feels like.
But none of the animals wanted to go back to the ocean.
Right.
They just stayed there and kept living.
Stayed there.
Yeah, we're good.
It's like the foliage like on the ground is like rock buds that the little inner green part like pops out when it rains, and then it sucks back down in when it's dry.
That's almost like sea anemone, but on the dry earth.
It's very cool.
Yeah, very neat. This is a really cool one. Arrakis from the book Dune. I don't know if you've read Dune
I have not.
or watched the movie.
I watched like the first 10 minutes and I fell asleep.
Oh, that's sad.
Gavin was here.
I just started rewatching this. It's a really good movie. I've also read the book a long time ago, but in the book Dune, Arrakis is the planet where most of the action takes place, and it is a desert planet basically. The setting of this planet causes all sorts of hardships because it's hard to live in the desert.
Right.
And so what springs up is all of this technology that allows people to survive in the desert. They have these suits that they put on that like recycles their water. Yep, all of it. All the moisture into drinking water. So, yeah. But that allows
salty.
Yeah. That allows them to survive. And because of this, like a way of honoring somebody when you like are greeting them. So this one point, one of the natives is coming in to meet the Duke, House Atreides. They've come and taken over Arrakis, the stewardship of it. And so this guy walks up and he spits on the ground. Initially, everybody gets upset, but Duncan, the guy who's been with these native people for a while, he assures them like, no, they're showing respect because they just lost fluid. And so in the desert, you wouldn't want to lose any of your liquids that you had to. And so when they spit out, it's a show of honor.
What an interesting concept.
It is. It's really fascinating. But then the character development that comes about because the Duke, his son, Paul Atreides, there's a huge battle, and the former stewards of the planet, they come back and attack them and lay waste to their operation. And so Paul Atreides, the son of the Duke, he has to flee into the desert with his mom. So just being in the desert causes him to grow a lot because he comes from a planet that's very lush and there's oceans, and so he's used to water just being plentiful.
Right.
But now he has to change. He has to grow and survive in this extremely harsh desert land. And then he also has to deal with the native people. They're called Fremen. And so he has to go find them, one, for survival, because he's on the run with his mom from these people that attack them. But then these people are also very violent. So they're like warrior tribes. And so he has to like work his way into there without getting killed by them because he needs them for survival. Anyway, it's a really neat setting. And it basically informs everything about the book.
Yeah.
Like just the setting of the desert.
So this topic, setting, is one that I have a little bit more of a struggle with.
Yeah.
Because of my aphantasia. So a lot of the time when books go into like immense detail on setting, it will go in one ear and immediately out the other.
Right.
Just because I can't retain it very well.
And for those listeners that may just be joining us, what is aphantasia?
Aphantasia is basically I have no visual memories or thoughts. All of it is in concepts. I do not picture anything when I'm reading.
Right.
So character descriptions, I don't retain them. If they say like they have blue eyes, I know that the character has blue eyes, but I don't like imagine a character with blue eyes. I just put it on the list, basically.
That would make viewing settings in your mind very difficult.
It does. So that's why it's easy for me to talk about Harry Potter and Hunger Games because those were movies. Right. So it's a little bit easier for me.
Because you remember the movie.
Right. I can't visualize the movie, but I remember the movie. It's weird. My brain associates a lot of like scenery and things like that after I watch movies with the soundtrack.
Yeah.
So
interesting. Do you have any other examples that you want to talk about, or you just want to continue down my list?
I was thinking about Narnia. I see you have Paralandra on here, but Narnia is a really good setting.
Yeah, the setting of Narnia is really cool, and there's different parts of Narnia.
Right.
So there's different settings within Narnia.
And it does change. Yes. Narnia does.
And similar to Dune and the desert being the setting, in Voyage of the Dawn Treader, like the ocean becomes a setting.
Yeah.
Like they're just on a boat in the ocean for a long time. And so there's a lot that takes place there, which is
Yeah.
really cool. And so that offers all sorts of challenges and limitations.
Mer people, there's a sea serpent.
Yeah, the sea serpent.
There's like the blackness that they float into and then they can't see anything.
Oh, yeah.
In the movie, it's like a green fog.
Yeah.
But in the book, it's a blackness.
Yeah.
Like they can't see.
Like in the book of Exodus, when the land goes dark.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and of course in the boy and his horse, or the
Horse
horse
and
and his
his
boy.
boy.
I always mix those up. There's another desert,
Yep.
so that's kind of a Middle Eastern type culture that he's coming from.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of it, but it's like the country bordering Narnia.
Right, and so they're...
Which I think is really interesting.
Yeah.
Because Aslan, speaks the world into existence. He not only creates Narnia, but other countries that do not believe what the
Right.
Narnians believe.
Yeah, that's really fascinating because God, when he created the earth, he created the garden and put Adam and Eve in the middle of the garden, but then he said, you go and cultivate the rest of the world.
Right.
So...
This is what it should look like.
Right. This is the template. Make the whole earth look like this. And so I think Lewis was picking up on that when he created Narnia and then all the stuff around
The
it.
desert and
Right.
mountains.
So the Narnians, their task was probably similar, to do the same thing.
Yeah.
In Paralandra, this is the second of the Ransom or the Space Trilogy by Lewis. So Ransom visits Venus, the planet Venus, and it's an ocean planet, basically. And so when he first lands, he ends up on these big islands. They're floating islands, but they're made up of vegetation. So they're very floppy. And so they go up the waves and then down the other side. So he's describing it, and he's talking about, like, you could be walking on the crest of a huge hill at one point, and then the next minute you're looking up a hill from a valley.
Right.
Just because this huge floating island went over a wave and down the other side.
Yeah.
And so the whole setting takes place in this ocean type planet with these floating islands. It's really fascinating. To get to other islands, you have to get on these dolphin-like fish creatures to take you there. He figures this out after meeting the lady or the queen who's there. But then they do have solid ground in the middle of the planet.
Okay.
It's like rooted and solid, like an island, like
Okay.
a solid island. And Ransom, when he first gets there, he's like so relieved. He's like, oh, this is like home. I like this a lot. But Maleldil, who's like the representation of God or Jesus, has given the lady who lives there the command that you shall not sleep on the solid ground. So, like, she's not supposed to stay there, but he wants to stay there. She's like, no, I can't stay here. Like, that's breaking the law. And so it's very interesting just what he does with the land and the setting that they're in to cause challenges, to cause growth.
Absolutely.
Speaking of Adam and Eve, so Paralandra is basically like a vision of a reimagining of Adam and Eve on a different planet.
Okay.
And having this human come from Earth, Ransom, to intervene, basically,
Right.
when Satan is tempting the woman.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, that's a really good book.
It's on my list. I've got a lot on my list.
Yeah.
I just thought of another really good one where the setting is vital.
Okay.
Piranesi.
Oh, yes! How did I not think of that one? The book is the setting.
I know, which is why I struggled with it so bad.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yes, that book is all about just describing the setting of the house.
And the house is a character.
The house is definitely a character. Like, yes.
And I can't even remember if it changes or if it's just
I don't think it changes, but it's just so massive.
so large.
That it's like it's changing because you go to all these different parts of the house. So there's this guy, for those who don't know about the book, there's this guy who is in this house. It says he's just in this house, but the world is the house.
Right.
And then there are parts of the house that are flooded. It's like this abandoned, decrepit old house. And some of the rooms, like when the tide comes up, they're flooded. And there's waves rolling in and barnacles all over everything. And then there's other parts of the house that are not. And there's these birds that come down. And then there's this other. It's another person, and he's talking about the other. But most of the book is just like describing.
It's just pure Nessie wandering around.
Yeah, him wandering around in this house and, just
cataloging.
Cataloging things and trying to remember things. It is really fascinating. And for someone like me, who is very visual, it was a great book. I really enjoyed it.
I don't really remember it.
Yeah. There's distinct pictures I have in my brain I can just pull up from that book.
Yeah, I know. I remember the part near the end when they're like floating and trying to get out.
Yeah.
And then I think they get out, and I don't remember what happens after that.
They do. They get out. Or he gets out.
But do they?
But does he? Was he ever in there?
Right. That's the thing. It's like Inception.
Yeah.
Book.
It's kind of a mind bender at the end.
Yikes.
Yeah, that's a great setting. The Phantom of the Opera. I've only ever seen the movie musical thing.
Yeah.
But the opera house kind of is a big part of the movie or book or whatever.
Musical. It is. So most of it takes place in the opera house. The Phantom lives there in this dungeon underneath, and he has like tunnels and ways to get around that other people can't see him, and he uses that and scary violence to manipulate the owners and like the people who are running the opera into doing what he wants, which I think is interesting because his motivation in the book, The Phantom, his motivation is just to make good music, but he does it in such a like violent, strange way because he doesn't want anybody to see him because his face is scary.
And of course there's the love interest
that gets in the way, and Christine, he wants Christine to be the soloist, and so he's trying to get the other lady out the way, and then he falls in love with her, and then Raoul falls in love with her. Classic love triangle.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. The Shining, which apparently was a book, but I never read the book. I saw the movie.
I have not seen the movie.
It was. I watched it probably when I was in middle school or high school, and I watched a lot of scary movies growing up. But that one, it kind of stays with you.
Is that the house one?
So this Jack Nicholson and his family, they get a job taking care of a hotel that's
with the twins
up in the mountains, and so they just have to live in the hotel and like keep the grounds. And he gets cabin fever and goes basically insane trying to kill his family. Oh. And there's ghosts in the hotel. And
okay, weird.
At least from the movie perspective, the hotel is it's something that just won't leave you alone.
Okay.
Like, it kind of stays in your memory for a long time.
So it's like the real scary version of that episode of Psych.
Which version of that?
Remember the one where Lassie is like in the hotel?
Yes, yes. Yeah, and in fact, the job he did, Stephen King, with this hotel was so good that it has been duplicated multiple times. So, Psych, they did it. Doctor Who, you remember when they were in the hotel and the Beast and worship the Beast? There was a lot of basically that in it, and I've seen it other times replicated. But just being all alone in a huge hotel when there's possibly like little girl ghosts around the next corner, and it's so creepy. It certainly makes the story very compelling.
Yeah. I think one last one that we should talk about is, you have it written down here but we skipped over it, is Avatar, Pandora.
The blue people.
Because you watch that movie for the setting.
Oh yeah.
That's like the only reason you watch it.
It is the movie.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it is gorgeous.
It's got a lot of really interesting interactions. Like, the Earth is alive.
Yeah.
And
it actually is a character.
Yeah.
What do they call it? Awa?
Awa, yeah. Awa is sentient, and she exists in the Earth.
Right.
And they actually, at one point, talk about how...
And they can plug their tails into her?
That's weird. But, okay, so her, like, the roots of all the trees are connected like neurons of her brain.
Yeah, it's like a huge neural network.
It's weird, it's funny, it's kind of like a computer. Like, once they die, they get, like, uploaded into, like, the neural connection. Basically,
Donna Noble has been saved.
Which is what happens? But it's really interesting, and the conflict is they're destroying the setting.
The humans are destroying the setting.
Right.
Because of money and greed. And
and then in the second one, which is also beautiful.
It's all about the water.
It's all about water.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they had to, for the point of the movies was save the forests and then save the whales.
Save the whales, yeah.
So they had to make it beautiful.
Right.
Like, that was the most important part.
Right.
But the creatures that they have there are really pretty, and everything's like bioluminescent, so it glows in the dark, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful.
And in the first one, Awa actually answers Jake Sully's prayer to her basically, and she has the animals start attacking the humans.
Right.
So the planet itself is defending itself.
Right, and she has the little tree jellyfish sperm things land on him so that nobody kills him.
Right, yeah.
So that they know he's been chosen.
The chosen one.
Chosen by Awa. And then even at the end, Awa, the Earth, transfers Jake's consciousness from his human body into his avatar. Permanently.
Yeah.
Which is wild.
It's got some metaphysical impact there.
Yeah.
What is a person? Just their consciousness?
A little weird, but okay.
Just their brain? Before we close out, one of the things I was talking to you, we had a writing session right before this, and like I said to you, I feel like I should be describing more things in this scene.
Yeah.
Which apparently is very difficult. But I feel like one of the challenges of making a compelling setting, especially one that becomes its own character, is you have to describe it well.
Yeah, so that's going to be a problem.
That's going to be a problem. Right, so maybe something we need to work on. Perhaps we could do an episode on describing things.
Yeah. How
do you come up with good descriptions? What makes a good description versus a bad description? So, as we close out, what are you currently reading or have recently finished reading?
So, I don't know, since the last time we recorded a podcast, I think I was actively reading The Last Battle. I finished that.
Right.
I read a book called Onyx and Ivory by Mindy Arnett. It was alright. And then I read a book called The Shadows Between Us by Trisha Levenseller. Which was an assassin tries to get the king to fall in love with her.
Femme fatale.
So that she can kill him and be the queen.
Right.
But then, obviously she falls in love with him and whatever. But anyway.
You saw that coming, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. 100%. 3 stars.
That's pretty bad coming from you.
I know. And I am currently reading a book called The Garden of the Cursed.
Okay.
By Katie Rose Poole. It's a interesting magic system where they use cards. They have to write the curses on a card.
Neat.
And then cast it. But if you burn the card, then the spell ends.
Huh. So
they're cursing each other, but there's 5 families that are kind of in charge of all the supplies that you need to make spells. And then there's a black market situation.
Right.
But the plot so far, I'm 130 pages in. It's one of the sons of the big families. He got cursed so that he has to obey every single command that he's given.
It's Enchanted.
Yeah. And he, they commanded him to not be able to talk about the curse and to not remember who put the curse on him. But it's really dangerous because it could be go murder your family and he would just have to do it. So she's trying to save him, and I'm sure they'll fall in love and break the curse and live happily ever after.
Probably, yeah.
I'm estimating 3 stars. I'm also reading Still the Blood of Elves by Andrzej Sapkowski. It's one of the Witcher books. I'm in the middle of Elantris, about halfway through that.
That's got an interesting setting, Elantris.
Yeah, it does.
In the plague-riddled city.
Yeah.
I can't remember. Is it Elantris?
Elantris,
that's the city, yeah.
And then obviously, The Hobbit, which I finished the first chapter, so.
Oh, good for you. I haven't.
We're doing our best.
Yeah. You've actually got a lot of books going on there.
I do, yeah. We'll see what happens.
So that's great. So I don't have that many, so I'm still working on Paralandra, which I was reading for a men's group. We had the discussion, and I wasn't finished, but I'm just continuing to read through that. I've still got Atlas Shrugged, which I'm going to finish it before the end of the year.
Sure. We're going to finish our books by the end of the year, too.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, definitely, yeah. And then also, I was telling you, I went back and re-listened to The Warded Man by Peter something like that. I've read it before. It's really good. I did the graphic audio version, which was problematic a little bit.
I have a problem with those, too, because they don't say, this character said, that character said, and I have no idea who's talking because I can't distinguish the voices.
Yeah. So there's that, and I did run into that a couple times. And then also, like, the level of sound effects and music sometimes, like, overwhelms.
So loud, yeah.
Like, what's going on in the story. I'm like, well, just let me know what's happening in the story. And then also, I didn't remember this from the first time, but there's a rape scene.
Oh!
Which wasn't... It's from, like, this travel companion's perspective, and the guys that get them, they're bandits, like they're beating him up while she's being raped, so it wasn't a big deal.
Wasn't a big deal.
Right, it wasn't a big deal. At least not audibly for me.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
But then the next day they run into the Warded Man, and he protects them, and then she decides that she needs to be with this guy. It's the next day.
What?
And she's wanting to jump this guy's bones.
No, absolutely not.
I know, right?
That is not how this works.
Like, no woman would do that.
No.
And she had saved herself, like, for years. She was a virgin.
Oh, my God.
Gets raped and then wants to immediately be with this guy, which they do.
The Warded Man? She's with the Warded Man?
Yeah.
Ew.
And they enact the thing. Yeah. I'm, like, hitting the fast forward. I'm like, nope.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Okay, so warning to the audience.
Warning for the audiobook version. Like, especially. Like, that's not good. I didn't want to listen to that.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. That's terrible. What?
Yeah, I know.
What woman is raped and then immediately wants to
I know, that it didn't make any
get
sense.
frisky with some
Like,
stranger?
This dude needs to ask a couple women about this first before he writes that. Like,
Yeah.
that's totally not happening.
Yeah, that's not how that works.
So I did finish that. It is a good book, apart from that scene.
It's such a hard thing, like, when you're recommending books to people, and it's like, this book is so good, except for this rape scene in the middle. You have to
Right.
skip that. Like, I'm not a terrible person, I promise. But
There's this one chapter, just blow past it. Yeah, this book literally is that. Like, it's an amazing book, except for that scene. So then I did start the second book, which I've never read. It's called The Desert Spear.
Okay.
And so I picked not the dramatized audio.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm just going to get some guy to read it.
Yeah.
And this one's pretty good. It's actually starting out. I hope the whole book isn't from this guy's perspective, but it's starting out as a different character than the first book main character, the Warded Man. And it was actually a guy who was a jerk to the Warded Man in the first book and like left him for dead.
Ah.
I know, so I'm not very far in.
Maybe there'll be some justice enacted.
Maybe, I don't know. We'll see. Thank you for joining us in this episode of Writing on Caffeine. We hope you'll join us again in 2 weeks or so. Please subscribe wherever you find podcasts. If you are so inclined, leave us a review. 5-star reviews are preferable. And please be sure to visit the website, writingoncaffeine.com, where you can view the show notes and subscribe to our email list so that you never miss an episode.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Hey, before you go, don't forget, we are giving away 3 books on writing: Wordsmithy by Douglas Wilson, On Writing and Writers by C.S. Lewis, and Adorning the Dark by Andrew Peterson. Go to the website to enter.